Welcome to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and today is the third episode with our wonderful guest who is talking about the pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. I really hope you enjoy the episode. I can't wait to find out what's in store. Welcome to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm giggling already because I'm joined for the third and final episode for now. I always say this because I know we'll be able to entice Becky back again. Becky Field from Westfield Coaching, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I thought you were laughing about the fact that I'm drinking out of a Guinness glass.
I love it. I love it. No, not at all. But yes, I love the irony of it.
I know.
Is that to do with Guinness being full of iron, or the irony of the sobriety you shared?
No, my old dog was called Guinness, and I got him before I got sober. And the irony is, even more, is I've got Stella Artois now as my other dog.
Oh, that is superb!
But I have got a second dog that's called Typhoo, so I think that's balanced it out.
Oh, you absolutely rock in my world, Becky. You're the best. That is brilliant, Stella Artois. Well, so we've got Lilu. Do you remember the film Fifth Element?
I do.
So Lilu was the saviour of the world.
Ah, very nice.
So we've got Lilu the dog because she came and saved us.
Ah, they do though. They do don't they? They do. Yeah. Maybe we should talk about them in leadership.
Yeah, although maybe we should.
I'm a bit questionable about what Typhoo gets up to behind me when I'm on Zoom, but you know, maybe not.
Oh, it's not like the pigeons that like to regularly visit my garden in the summer when I decide to work outside and they're on the fence behind me, is it?
Probably worse. I won't go into
it. Rather amorous, Becky. It was really embarrassing, and I'm on a video call and then going at it. Oh my God, I just remembered that. That's hilarious. Anyway, pigeons leading themselves to fulfill their needs. Interesting. So today we are talking about your pivotal moments. So please just dig in and go ahead.
Okay. So we were talking before, weren't we, about, you know, as a coach, I'm very direct, and we were talking, weren't we, about the fact that, you know, I don't accept unacceptable behavior, which if we think about what pivotal moments come to that point, I suppose it's both of those things that I've spoken about in the first episode, you know, the fact that obviously I was drinking to excess before I stopped. And what manifested, and I hate that word, what manifested itself in my drinking days was a lot of anger. And knowing what I know about myself now, you know, over nearly 18 years of being sober, is I am really passionate, you know, and I've dealt with so much of the anger. But I am passionate about sticking up for people. I'm passionate about fighting for people. I'm passionate about not accepting unacceptable behavior. And I think it's because I know how close I was to losing absolutely everything, you know, and I also know that I was accepting a lot, you know, so it's not about portioning blame outside of me. That's not what my program's about in AA. But I know what I wasn't doing was talking about stuff. I wasn't being honest about stuff. I was burying everything in my, you know, just burying it, not talking to anybody. And yet the madness was, Paula, I had and still have a beautiful man who would look after me. You know, I had my family around me. I had friends around me. And really on the outside, you look as if you've got the perfect world. And yet I wasn't talking about anything. I wasn't being honest. I was living a lie, literally, and yet not knowing what to do about it. So I drank.
Okay.
And, you know, so you get to a point where you stop knowing who you are and just feeding this. When I was drinking, I would feed this anger and this resentment towards people. And yet, because I wasn't able to articulate what I wanted to say, I just accept it like a little meek person, you know? um, and let's not, you know, I was teaching at that time as well. So it was 2000 to 2005. I was drinking, but I wasn't drinking during the day, but I was drinking while I was teaching. And all that time, and anybody knows if they've worked in education, a lot of changes, and yet not speaking about it and just drinking. So a pivotal moment obviously was that anger just really manifested itself one night, and I threatened somebody, which I'm not proud of, but I did, you know. But I was in blackout, and what that doesn't give an excuse, but I drank enough to not remember. And the pivotal moment was when I woke up the next day, knowing something was different. So that's the first one.
God, that's given me goosebumps, actually, Becky, because it is that actual moment in time where you can actually totally pinpoint where the switch flicked.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that the night before you were Becky who was drinking and in that turmoil, if I'm allowed to use that
yeah,
word. And then
absolutely.
the next day you're like, something's different and
Yeah,
something's got to change.
yeah, yeah. And it was absolute. It was. I was almost like a shell. I remember where I was sat. I was sat in my lounge. I was sat literally scrunched to the end of the sofa, knowing or not knowing what I'd done the night before,
Mm.
and just knowing that something was different in my behaviour that night than I've ever done, which was true. I never did anything, obviously, but the pivotal moment was knowing that I had, even though it was more of a feeling because I didn't know at that time. People had to
Mm.
tell me what happened. And that's where you think this is totally an utter madness. This is not who I am. And that's where you just think, or I thought then, first of all, I need help. But second of all, this is not a way to live. It's no way for my partner to live. And it was a case of something had to change. And thankfully it did. Thankfully it did.
Yeah. That's really incredible. And you know, I think I said to you in the first episode, the sheer courage and bravery that you would have had to muster, I think that's a
Mm,
good word, at that time for yourself when
yeah.
you hit rock bottom. Somehow we've have the strength to pull ourselves out of these things, because if you hadn't had that initial glimmer of courage and bravery to go ask for that help,
Mm,
then you may not hope your partner was around you, okay, but just saying, in general situations, sometimes you don't have the right people around you to do it
yeah.
for you.
Yeah. But fortunately, if we're talking about leadership, the person who actually took me into AA, because I am in AA, is a woman who was in the pub that night, but she was sober. So she just come
Okay.
and we were having a conversation. So if we talk about leaders, she was the one. We'd had a conversation numerous times about her recovery and her sobriety while I
Mm.
was drinking. So she led me, and in fact, she led me by taking me to my first meeting. So if we're talking about leadership, and even I remember when I was a year sober and she was 3 years sober, we sat together at a convention and we were just looking at each other because we used to drink together, you know, and we're like
Yeah.
that. We're in
Yeah.
an AA convention thinking this is just incredible, you know, and she's just celebrated, obviously, she will have celebrated 21 years now. So she's still a
That's-
leader in my eyes because she's still leading that way.
yeah, yeah. And there's so many strengths that you will have demonstrated for yourself, for your own benefit.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to, identify that in her as well, and that leadership of her helping to bring you out of one of your dark moments in life, is just amazing. And I really am grateful to you for sharing that with us all and the listeners. Just because, let's hope, even if it helps one of our listeners, to have the courage to help themselves, that's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Because, we lead the way for somebody else to find their way. It sounds a bit wet, but I'm dead passionate about that as well, especially when people are struggling, struggling with drinking, struggling with anything. If we've overcome something, like the other pivotal moment we just discussed with you was when I absolutely acknowledged that I needed to have time out. I needed to go, as my boss said, go to the doctor's, sweetie. I needed to go to the doctor's because I wasn't myself. But it was a shock to me because I thought, well, I've boxed this off now. I boxed this off because I was 8 years sober, and yet I didn't feel myself, and I recognised that I wasn't myself but the poor mental health was there. So again, it's that recognition first, isn't it?
It is. And just as you were talking there, what came up for me is that not only that sort of self-awareness piece for you when you're leading yourself, but also as the leader that's observing what's going on, is being brave enough to give the permission to that person, because sometimes that person needs the permission to go take care of themselves. Because they're, you can be so wrapped up in the fact that you're loyal to your job, you can't afford to lose your job. What if I take some time off? I'm going to be passed over for the next promotion, or I'm not going to get the good next project, or they're going to sack me because X, Y, and Z. All these irrational thoughts go through our minds. I've been there, and it's scary to front up and say, actually, I need to take time out. And being that amazing leader in front of you to say, it's okay, go and take care of yourself. We talked about it a couple of times, is that real gift, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely a gift. And I would say as well that, another leader is the human resource person who was involved at both stages there, because she was involved. Let me just click this because I can't see it. There we go. She was involved in both of the situations when I was off work through the recovery. So I went, I took some time out in recovery, but I was also off again at the same employment 8 years later for poor mental health. And the lady from HR was the same person who was absolutely instrumental in both of those occasions and absolutely brilliant. And she was a wonderful, wonderful leader of, again, empathy, kindness, but, leaning into me, being very direct, very clear, no wishy-washy, just telling me as it is. Because, like you say, those irrational fears come up, and yet, and I always say to people, if there's a gap, we'll fill it with rubbish.
Yeah.
If there's a gap, if there's clarity, and if there's real direct conversations that are, open, honest, transparent, there's no gap to fill. And yet, if it goes back to the games, and yet if there's like, oh, I won't say anything, it's just, and the insinuations and then we will fill. If you're of an anxious mindset, you will fill that with rubbish, without a doubt.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, Becky. You're so right in terms of that. Fill it with rubbish. I always say, make up my own story to fill up the gaps. Not me necessarily, but people in this situation. They might catastrophize about what's going on. What's being said behind my back. And that paranoia can creep in. You can drive yourself potty with what might be going on.
Yeah.
And
then
you've got real clarity. There's no need for any of that, is there?
No. And it's like you say, you know, a fabulous coaching question, and you'll know this is, you know, when people are going, well, what if it didn't happen?
Yeah. So,
you know, what if they're not? What if they, you know?
And what's the cost to you if you don't make a change? I love that
Exactly.
question.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because you've got, and I always say this, this is one of my passions, Becky. As hard as it is to see, and I totally accept, it's really, really hard on occasions. There is always a choice.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Mm.
There is always a choice. And again, I've used this term before, so hopefully the listeners are used to this. We are masters of our own destiny.
Yeah.
And if we don't choose the best path for ourselves, hopefully somebody leading around us is going to help us to choose that right path.
Yeah.
You know, because we've got to look out for each other and help each other. There needs to be more of that in the world. Imagine for a moment, listeners, what would be possible if we all supported each other and looked out for each other. What a, you know, and yes, I'm putting my rose tinted specs on for a minute and I'm not going to apologize. Wouldn't that be the most awesome place to live?
Yeah. Selflessly, though, that's the other thing, isn't it? Is, you know, if things were reciprocated and if it was selfless, we look out for you because we care, not because of what we're going to gain at the end of it. You know, it's and again, that goes back to a previous part of our conversations where we're saying it's like building that trust up to believe what somebody's saying to you, you know, to say, listen, and there's a fabulous woman in AA who's sadly no longer with us. She used to say, if somebody was going down the wrong way down a one-way street, wouldn't you stop and tell them? And you just thought, well, yeah, of course I would. Even if you told them in a way where you go, hey, you would tell them. Likewise, if somebody's going in the wrong direction or if somebody's doing something that's detrimental to their well-being, wouldn't you tell them? Yes, I would. And yes, you would. You know, that's just, it would be wonderful. You're right.
Yeah, and that, I love that. Again, you know, getting a bit of the chills here again, because it's just such a lovely discussion to have about what might be possible if we just, you know, people just took a little bit of extra time to care for others, genuinely care, not for how good it makes me look as a leader because I'm caring for this team. You know, it's not about that at all. It's about, you know, I'm caring because I genuinely care about your well-being and want to see you succeed. You know, I've been in teams where people have come to me and said, well, I don't know how to tell you, not because I'm a scary person, but I've got a new job and I don't want to leave this team. It's so fantastic, but I've got a new job. You know, and it's just been such a funny conversation. And then you're like, that's amazing. I'm gutted personally that you're going from the team.
Yeah.
But what an amazing opportunity. How can I help?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you need from me? Yeah.
Precisely.
Exactly.
And that's a very different conversation to, oh, you're handing in your notice. You've got 3 months notice. I'm going to cut you off now. Just get your work done. I'm not interested. You've betrayed me and the team, you know.
Or even worse, put them on garden leave. Put them on garden. It's great for them, you know, but it's almost like you think, well, you're putting them on garden leave or just getting rid of them there and then. I mean, you'll know this. We need endings. People need endings. So where's the rest of the team in that consideration as well? You know, it's hard. I mean, we're talking as if it's easy decisions as a leader, but sometimes, you know, it's funny. I have these conversations a lot. Is, you know, some people find themselves in leadership positions by default. They've not chosen to be there, but they've found it or they've got it by default because they've been the longest time there. You know, have they ever been asked? You know, Did they know what's involved in it? Have they ever been trained to be a leader? You know,
Yeah. That's really interesting, Becky, because we've had a few guests on here over the past year almost. We're nearly at a year, I can't believe it. That have sort of shared that they almost fell into that leadership position.
oh,
Yeah, as you say, by default,
yeah,
or they were asked, they'd never considered it for themselves, and suddenly they find themselves, sort of almost catapulted into this new important position. And what the heck do they do with that?
yeah,
They don't even know where to start.
yeah,
And we've had some lovely stories about people, then asking for help, being trained. I've witnessed it myself in teams that I've been part of, where people have said, you know what, this is my first time and I'm freaking out. Can I go on some sort of course to support
yeah,
me? That kind of stuff. So again, it comes back to that self-awareness, doesn't it? Where people are willing to put their hand up and say, I need the help, but
yeah,
B, for the leader then to say, yes, of course,
yeah.
because
What do
we
you
want
need
them to
from me?
succeed. What do
Yeah,
you need from me? I want to invest in your success, therefore our team's success, therefore our organisation's success.
yeah, yeah. And like you say, it is about them holding the hand up. Um, but how many people have the courage to do that?
Yeah, but again,
Hope.
I would argue that comes back to that psychological safety. It's
Yeah,
about what you're creating for your team. If we think of leadership in a traditional sense,
yeah,
as we all think about leaders in organisations, for your team. But that's exactly the same if you're running your own business and you're building a
yeah,
team. You've
mm,
got to create that psychologically safe space where they
yeah,
feel they can truly show up as themselves
mm,
and truly, warts and all, as I say,
yeah,
this is me, these are the strengths I bring, these are the bits that I'm not great at, but let's learn together, let's build this train whilst we're on it, and
yeah,
adding the
yeah, yeah,
carriages as we're going along and
yeah.
what have you. Let's do it together. And
Mm,
boy, that's powerful. And boy, it's great fun. I mean,
yeah,
I was lucky enough to really, really see an amazing example of that when I worked with the British Olympic Association back towards the 2012 Olympics.
mm,
Um, you know, just incredible sort of example of that. But now in smaller scale and
yeah.
not quite on the global stage, just
Mm,
you're all not the same. I miss it. It was amazing.
yeah,
But what I'm doing now, all of that, but on a smaller scale. We're building this together.
yeah,
It's incredible.
yeah. And my mentor always says, the the way the world is now, we are having to be extremely flexible and adaptable, which is, why I
Mm,
trained in this spotlight accreditation, because it is all about adaptability. And it's kind of like you say, you've got these strengths, but I've also got these that I'm not so good at, and
mm,
just knowing that, and just, I think, having an open conversation and knowing that you can bring everything. It's almost like you can't just leave the bad bits at the door. That comes with you into the office, or it comes with you behind the Zoom screen, or StreamYard, or however. Yeah, you just can't, it's all of you, you know and like you say, we have to adapt, and as teams grow and people get added to it, you'll know this. It's
mm.
almost like, I always say, it's like a nestle for position. If you've ever seen chickens,
Yeah.
there's the nestle for where their position is in the pen. Look at me like this, as if I know what I'm doing. But it is.
Yes.
It's kind of like this sort
Honestly,
of,
she's pecking round the hen
yeah.
pen.
That's what I'm doing, like this, getting my feathers out.
Yeah, I always call it jostling for position.
Isn't it? Isn't it? And as another one comes in, you've got to do it all again, because the
Yeah,
dynamics change. But if you've got adaptability and flexibility, I mean, even as an NLP practitioner, they say about the flexibility is key in all of it. You know,
yeah.
um,
But it's that forming, storming, norming, performing, isn't it, as well? But every time a new team member comes in, you go back to that
exactly.
start to do
Yeah,
it all again.
Yeah.
But the stronger the team is and the more open the team is, the easier it is for that newcomer and for the team
Absolutely.
to adjust and flex.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it makes it
because
magical.
yeah, exactly. And also going back to, I mean, it is me tapping into all our conversations now, is if it's open, if it's transparent, if we can see it all, that new team member comes in and feels safe already because there isn't any games, because it's all laid out. And
Yeah.
that is the beauty of, if we're talking about a brilliant game of leadership, that to me is the one cream of the crop.
Oh, brilliant. Well, what a lovely way to finish what's been the most amazing 3 episodes, Becky. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you, but I hope the grin on my face says it all.
Oh,
It's
thank you so
been,
much.
yeah, it's been so fascinating talking to you. And it's just doing this podcast has got to be one of my favorite things because I get to talk to just such inspirational people like yourself who are willing to put themselves out there, share their stories, let's say it warts and all. It's
Yes.
just fabulous. And I feel really privileged. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me. And yeah, can't wait to have a listen again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will get you on the podcast again, no doubt, in the future, because once you're part of the Game of Leadership family, you're not allowed to leave.
I love it. I love it. And keep being fantastic, Paula. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Becky. You're welcome, and have a great rest of week. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. This has been the 3rd episode and final episode for a little while anyway, with our guest who shared their pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. Again, I talk about uniqueness a lot. Every guest story and their pivotal moments, the challenges they faced, the issues they faced over the years to get to where they are now, and how they pulled themselves through all of that, makes them the leader they are today, and each one of those stories is unique and different. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with them and see what that meant for them. Now, once again, it's your turn to reflect on what you've heard today, see what resonates for you, and think about what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I look forward to welcoming you back next time on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Bye for now.